In our last two episodes, Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung taught us to look deep inward, exploring the unconscious mind through repressed childhood traumas and ancient mystical myths. But there was a third man in the room, a man who sat at Freud's famous Wednesday psychological meetings in Vienna, listening to all this talk about repressed childhood sexuality and ancient gods, and thought, "You are both missing the point." His name was Alfred Adler. Adler didn't care about the dark basement of the unconscious or the mystical ocean of dreams. He looked outward, at the real world, our place in society, and the goals we set for our own future. While Freud believed we were pushed from behind by our past traumas, Adler believed we are pulled forward by our future goals. At the core of Adler's radically practical philosophy is a single, uncomfortable question. Why are we all trying so desperately to prove that we are better than everyone else? Welcome to episode 6 of our journey through the human mind. This is Alfred Adler and The Perfection Trap, a journey out of the shadows and into the real world, to uncover the hidden insecurities that secretly drive our every ambition. To understand Adler, you have to look at the pain of his childhood. While Freud was the golden child of his family, adored by his mother and raised in a bubble of special treatment, Adler was the ultimate underdog. He suffered from severe rickets and couldn't even walk until he was 4 years old. He was run over in the street twice. He nearly died of pneumonia, and tragically, his younger brother died in the bed right next to him. On top of all this physical frailty, he spent his childhood living in the shadow of his healthy, highly athletic, and successful older brother. From this painful, vulnerable starting line, Adler realized a universal truth about the human condition. We all start life feeling deeply inferior. Think about it. As a baby, you are born into a world of giants. You are the weakest creature in the room. You cannot feed yourself, you cannot walk, and you can barely communicate. You are surrounded by massive adults who dictate your schedule, control your movements, and hold absolute power over your survival. Adler called this the baseline of inferiority. But here is where Adler broke away from pessimism. He didn't see this profound sense of weakness as a curse. He saw it as the greatest engine of human evolution. Because we feel small, we strive to grow. Because we are physically weaker than predators, we invent weapons. Because we are vulnerable to the freezing cold, we discover fire and build cities. Every great human achievement, from the invention of the wheel to sending a rocket to the moon, is a direct result of our attempt to overcome our own limitations. Adler called this lifelong mission striving for superiority. But he didn't mean dominating other people. He meant a continuous, lifelong striving for mastery, competence, and superiority over your former, weaker self. If this drive to overcome our weakness is completely natural, where do things go wrong? They go wrong when a person faces challenges they feel they cannot beat, and that childhood feeling of inadequacy hardens into a permanent, toxic psychological state. Adler coined a term for this that has become a staple of modern psychology: the inferiority complex. When a person gets trapped in an inferiority complex, their psychological growth freezes. They walk through life with a quiet voice in their head, constantly whispering, "You are a fraud. You are not enough. Everyone else is better than you." But the human ego is fragile. It cannot tolerate that kind of agonizing pain forever. So, to survive, the mind pivots to a powerful defense mechanism called overcompensation. Instead of actually solving the problem, The person builds a massive, exhausting psychological shield to hide their weakness from the world. If you want to spot someone with a severe inferiority complex, don't look for the quiet, shy person hiding in the corner. Look for the loudest person in the room. The bully. The person who constantly criticizes, belittles, and dominates others is overcompensating for a deep-seated terror of being powerless. They shrink others to feel big. The workaholic. The person who sacrifices their family, sleep, and health to amass wealth and titles isn't just driven. They are often trying to build a fortress of success to protect themselves from feeling worthless. The perfectionist. The person who obsesses over every tiny detail and cannot tolerate a single mistake isn't actually aiming for excellence. They are terrified that if they aren't completely flawless, the world will finally see the inadequate child they still feel like inside. Adler made a brilliant observation here. A superiority complex is just an inferiority complex wearing a crown. Arrogance, narcissism, and the need to constantly boast are never signs of true confidence. They are the desperate masks of a terrified ego. One of Adler's most revolutionary contributions to psychology was shifting our focus entirely from the past to the future. Freud looked at human behavior and asked, "What happened to you in the past to make you this way?" Freud believed you were pushed from behind by your traumas. Adler looked at human behavior and asked, "What goal are you trying to achieve right now by acting this way?" Adler believed you are pulled forward by your future. Adler introduced the concept of fictional finalism. This is the ultimate, often unconscious finish line that you construct for yourself to finally cure your inner feelings of inferiority. We tell ourselves a story. If I can just make $1 million, I will finally be respected. If I can just get this person to marry me, I will never be lonely or abandoned. If I can just be the smartest person in the room, nobody can ever hurt me. Adler called these goals fictional because they are illusions. Hitting that milestone rarely cures the soul. The goalpost just moves. However, the pursuit of that fiction dictates your entire personality. This completely changes how we view mental struggles. For instance, Adler would look at a patient suffering from crippling anxiety, not just as a victim of a chemical imbalance or a bad childhood, but as someone whose mind is using anxiety for a purpose, perhaps as a perfect excuse to avoid the possibility of failure. If you want to truly understand yourself, Adler argued, don't dig endlessly into your past. Figure out what fictional goal you are secretly chasing, and your entire life will instantly make sense. Because Adler was so focused on society and family dynamics, he was the first major psychologist to study birth order. He believed that the psychological environment of a family changes entirely depending on when you enter it. The oldest child starts as the center of attention, but is dethroned when the second child arrives. They often become rule followers, responsible, and crave authority, trying to regain that lost throne. The middle child never has the parents' undivided attention. They are constantly looking at the older child ahead of them and trying to catch up. They often become competitive, rebellious, and highly driven. This was Adler himself. The youngest child, the eternal baby. They are never dethroned and have many parents, older siblings, taking care of them. They can become highly charming and creative, but run the risk of becoming dependent and spoiled. While modern psychology debates the strict accuracy of birth, order, rules, Adler's core insight remains profound. Your personality is deeply shaped by the specific role you had to play to survive your family dynamic. Freud thought you were a victim of your biology. Jung thought you were a vessel for ancient myths. But Alfred Adler gave us something radically empowering: responsibility. He taught us that our perceived weaknesses are not curses. They are challenges. The person with a stutter can become a great orator. The sickly child can become a doctor. You are not a prisoner of your past. You are the architect of your destiny. But Adler offered one final crucial warning. How do you know if your drive for superiority is healthy, or if you are just trapped in a toxic complex? Adler's answer was a concept he called Gemeinschaftsgefühl, a German word translating to social interest or community feeling. He believed that the only true cure for the inferiority complex is genuine connection with others. If your pursuit of greatness isolates you, makes you arrogant, or harms the people around you, you are still sick. True psychological health is achieved when you take all the strength, skills, and superiority you have built and use it to elevate the community. Alfred Adler brought psychology out of the clinic and into the living room. But as the 20th century marched on, a new group of scientists grew tired of theories about invisible things like the unconscious and inferiority. They wanted cold, hard, measurable facts. In Chapter 7, we leave the philosophers of the mind behind and enter the laboratory. We will meet the behaviorists who will ask a terrifying question. What if free will doesn't exist at all? Don't forget to subscribe as we continue our 12-part journey through the evolution of the human mind. Because to change your life, you must first understand the machine that creates it.